We are back, McConnell and Shannon, with you. And Rob Longley joins us, who covers the Toronto Blue Jays. Quite a day to be talking about this team after a 20-1 victory, which I guess marks the end of this drought. What I said to John the other day, we were talking a bit about it, and I said, this kind of thing, almost every team in baseball goes through one of these runs sometime over the course of the year, where nothing seems to work, nothing seems to go well, and you lose a bunch of games in a row. The problem here seems to be that we're still fairly early in the season, and the impact of what has happened to the Blue Jays over the past, 10, 15 days is pretty dramatic. Do you see a cause? Do you see a specific reason why this team has gone through this last 10, 12 game drought?
First of all, Bob, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, there is a tendency to dismiss a bad stretch like this as being just part of the baseball season and it's still only May and all that kind of stuff. But when you find yourself 9.5 games out of the division lead because of it, in a division that's the toughest division in baseball, in a division where you don't get to play the other teams as much as you used to in the past because of the new schedule, it's definitely concerning. As for a cause, I mean, there's the people around the Blue Jays tend to want to dismiss it as being just baseball, right? A lot of hard hit balls, they're getting hits, they're just not scoring with runners in scoring position. And I suppose to a small extent that's true. But I mean, we heard so much about this team in spring training that they were going to be the team that did the little things right, that they were going to move runners around the bases. They weren't going to have to rely on home runs like they did in the last couple of seasons. All the things we heard them that they were going to do in spring training are the things that they haven't been doing. They've been running into outs on the base paths. They have not been able to score with runners in scoring position, last night being the exception. And they're making mental mistakes that this team we were told was not going to make. Is it a temporary thing? We're going to find out, I guess, because the schedule doesn't get a whole lot easier for them in the short term anyways.
Yeah, my perception would be this not getting key hits when you have runners in scoring position has been very dramatic and really quite obvious. And the problem becomes, I don't know what you do about it. I don't, how do you teach a guy, how do you tell a guy to get a hit with 2 on and 2 out? Because it's happening over and over and over again.
That's in Little League.
Well, you can say whatever you want to say, yeah. But I mean, what actually can you do about it, Rob?
I mean, I guess the only thing you really can do is tell each and every hitter not to try to be the hero, not to try to force things, try to make sure you slap a single like Bo Bichette tends to do, or you have a 4-hit night like George Springer did on Tuesday by not trying to do too much. Because, I mean, I guess that is human nature when you're in a funk like that and you're a team that is, better than what you've been showing, that everybody tries to force the issue a little bit. And this team's not designed to do it that way. It's not a slugging team. It's a team that's meant to grind out runs. And so you just kind of have to hope that they exhale and take a deep breath and maybe get back to just sticking with what works for them. Maybe a game like last night helps. I mean, I know it was 20-1. 10 of those runs came off of position players, but the fact is that they scored 10 in the first 6 innings, and maybe that was what they needed, a breakout like that to sort of allow them to reset a bit mentally.
But what's amplified the whole concern, I think, Rob, is that if you look at this division, they can't seem to win games in the division more than anything else. I mean, the sweep in Boston, the Yankees come in here, Tampa comes in here, Baltimore comes in here. That's almost as big a concern as the overall swoon, isn't it?
I agree. I mean, we hear so much about this because of the partially balanced schedule, that it was actually going to be easier for the Jays to rack up wins. And that may be true in terms of the bottom number at the end of the season, but it actually makes it difficult to catch the teams in front of you when you don't do well against them. What are they, 6-13 against the AL East now, or something like that? And we saw it last week when the Yankees came into town and they essentially kicked the Jays around like they were their little brothers. They heard enough of people saying that the Jays see the Yankees as their prime rivals, and the Yankees are like, no, no, you guys don't play at Fenway Park. You know, our rivals are in Boston. You guys aren't our rivals. You're our little brother. We're going to kick you to the curb. Baltimore Orioles, all they hear is talk about, yeah, your start isn't for real. Well, they came in and showed the Jays who they were as well, and swept them. So you have to have some success against the teams in your division. I think there's more of an importance on it this season than in the past. Somewhat ironically, they've got a winning record against the Tampa Bay Rays right now, the only team in baseball that does. And with 2 games remaining in this series, I think, at worst they need to get a split from it so that they can stay within single digits behind the division leader before this is over.
One of the things that you inevitably look at in the midst of something like this is change. Is there anything you can see that the Blue Jays might do in order to make changes within the roster? Is the manager safe? We know that there's another manager in the dugout that has more experience than he does, and seems to be the guy in waiting. I mean, I don't believe in that kind of thing, but nonetheless, it exists. And when you're in the midst of a losing streak, that's when this comes up. That's when you start talking about, should we make a managerial change? Do you think there's any changes coming?
No, I don't think so, Bob. I mean, Don Mattingly very much exists, and he's there, and he would be there as a potential replacement if it becomes necessary. But to me, there are no signs that Schneider's anywhere close to losing the room. He's become this good communicator, this good players manager.
I agree.
Has strong relationships with a lot of them. Things continue to go south. Obviously, the mistake that he made by going to the mound for the second time in an inning last weekend is a critical mistake that a big league manager, should not be making. And I suppose if that sort of behavior became a habit forming, then there would be some concern. But there's no indication in my mind that he's lost the room, and probably the opposite. He was very reassuring to this team during this stretch, this poor stretch, and I actually saw him doing some very proactive stuff that I haven't seen from a Jays manager since I've been covering the beat, and that was some serious one-on-one conversations in the clubhouse with guys who've been struggling, and not reading them in the riot act kind of conversations, but kind of building them back up and saying, listen, we need you to be a factor on this team, and we need you to just chill a little bit, take a breath, and get back to being who you are. So nowhere close to losing the room. So I would have to think there's nowhere near any threat of him losing his job. Now, if this team continues to struggle and becomes a less than 500 team by midseason, do we start to look at broader changes? Like, does management start to come into the issue? Because Rogers is spending a lot of money, both in payroll and in the $300 million renovations, and they're going to be asking for a lot of money going into the 2024 season with the renovations in the lower bowl in that stadium. And are people going to want to support a team that's a last place team or a non-contender? So early days for that yet, but if the struggles could continue, I think that the bigger picture may be the most interesting one.